Welcome back, Flyers Nitty Gritty fans, to Getting Gritty with It with your host, Wolok, my partner in crime, as always, Vasili Gianarakos. Vasili, what's going on, bro?
I'm doing well, Yariv. Hoping the same on your end. Just in terms of the Flyers, obviously a little bit of a lull period since their
Yeah.
last game, a couple days off. There have been some practices. So there is stuff to talk about. We have, a pretty jam-packed show. The team, just to reference, in the last 10 is 5-3-2. So they've been essentially hockey 500. So there's some good things to point out, some bad things. We're gonna get into that all.
Yeah, we got stuff to talk about, but it's definitely been like an odd lull here.
Mhm.
Probably because we're right around the holidays. The Flyers are walking into a back-to-back game, but this was kind of the best day to record. Um, And I don't know. It's just like this weird lull period. We're probably going to experience it through Christmas and then the New Year's. And then things are probably going to ratchet up from there. But we do have some topics to talk about for sure. All right, let's do the usual spiel before we kick it off. Just want to remind everybody, please like and subscribe to the podcast. Again, if you're listening and especially if you're a repeat listener or watcher, and you're not subscribed, please do so. It's the best way to support us. Like the video if you can. It's also humongous help. Hit the notification bell at the top to get notified. When we release our episodes, they're kind of random sometimes, right? Any day between Monday and Thursday, usually during the regular season. So a little inconsistent, but we do try to have an episode out every week. And also for the audio versions, go to Spotify and iTunes. Give us a follow and a rating there as well. Also a great way to support the show. And also a shout out to our sponsors. First sponsor, Jim Steaks at 4th and South. Make sure to go get yourself a cheesesteak from Jim's at 4th and South. They have one of the best, if not the best, cheesesteak in Philadelphia. It's cold out. It's sports season. There's a lot of sports going on right now. Make sure to go to Steve Steaks and pick yourself up a cheesesteak. You will smell it a mile away. And to Summit Public Adjusters, 215-752-0560. Go to Summit Public Adjusters to help them facilitate your process between you and your insurance companies. They will help you deal with all of the headaches that come with dealing with an insurance company. They'll make sure that you can get the best claim that you can get. Again, Summit Public Adjusters, 215-752-0560. And also want to give a brief shout out to our partner, SportsSpider.com. If you're tired of searching multiple websites for sports news, SportsSpider.com has you covered. They collect the latest articles, videos, and podcasts from around the web and organize them by your favorite teams. If you want to stay as up to date on our Philadelphia Flyers or the NHL in general, make sure to check out SportsSpider.com. The link to Sports Spider is in the description. They are our partners. Our stuff is pinned at the top. Make sure to check out SportsSpider.com. All right, let's get into it. We don't have any like real news as far as Flyer stuff go, but we'll get into it. So the first thing is, and this is, I guess, we'll give credit to Charlie O'Connor because that's the tweet that I am referencing personally here. Emil Andre seems to still be a healthy scratch going into the next game. I think it's a little unexpected because Emil was playing so well for the Flyers, and all of a sudden now he's scratched in back-to-back games. So when the Flyers face the Red Wings on Wednesday, when this episode I guess airs to everybody, since it's releasing Tuesday night, he most likely will not be in the lineup. We'll see if he gets in the lineup against the Kings on Thursday, since it's a back-to-back. I think that potential is definitely there. I also think there's a lot here to manage. Now, I did talk to Jamie Baskow. He suspects that maybe Andre's banged up. It's possible, too. And they want to give him extra time, just don't want to make it kind of public. It's definitely possible. But I also think with the amount of defensemen that Torts has, I know it's easy for us to favor and, pick certain guys as favorites.
New shiny toy, right?
Well, yes, for sure with Andre, but he also earned it, right? He's outplayed Zamula. If you look at their entire sample size
For
throughout the
sure, for
season.
sure. I just mean
But
in the sense that, like, fans see a new player come and play so well, they're like, why is he out of the lineup, right?
right, absolutely. But I think it's also on Tortorella's job is to manage his lineup, right? Like some guys are just going to be sitting there if he's not playing, and I don't think the organization has given up on Zamula. Definitely not like the Twitterverse. And there's another guy, Johnson, who hasn't played at all lately whatsoever. So it's like maybe they'll end up putting Johnson in a game randomly as well because again, these guys are just sitting and they do need to play to some extent because if you need them they have to be ready and they can't just sit out for long stretches. So I think some of that plays a role in this. What do you think, Vasily?
Yeah, for me personally, I think people probably know my opinion on Andre. Like I was the person who said, "Hey, once this kid finally gets his opportunity, he's going to be a mainstay." So, in terms of if I would have scratched him based on his play, personally, I wouldn't have done it. Like I think he's been a really big reason for the Flyers becoming a lot more efficient in exiting their D zone, moving the puck up the ice in a variety of ways. Like he's just very aggressive, in terms of his style of play, and that's really how the team wants to play, right? So his style, I would say, is conducive to how the team wants to play. But I think you hit the nail on the head, Yariv, just in the sense that we were never going to see Igor Zamula be a healthy scratch
Yeah.
for the rest of the season. So I think we have to be realistic that we're probably going to see a little bit of a rotation in a sense between Zamula and Andre. I think the team's probably a bit more comfortable sitting Johnson, just in the sense that they're already kind of aware of his role and he is aware of his role. Whereas like when you're sitting a young guy for such a prolonged period of time, you could be really detrimenting their development and their overall play and just their ability to progress as a player at the NHL level, right? So I do think it was a no-brainer. Well, not a no-brainer, but I do think like that it was a no-brainer. We're gonna see Zamula back, in the lineup at some point. I personally, like I said, I would have put Andre back in there in the last game. But Jamie, was right. His point, like Andre took a really big hit. There's potentially could be some concussion worries there. Obviously, the team hasn't made that public, but you never know if somebody's a little bit banged up, and why not take some extra time, especially when you have a Zamula who can step in or a Johnson that can step in if need be. So I definitely don't think this is the end of the road for Andre in any respects with the NHL club. Like we're going to see him back in the lineup in terms of when that might be. We'll have to see, but I think that Kings game might potentially be a target, especially if there's a loss against Detroit. I could totally see it. But we'll ultimately see what happens. I
Yeah.
think just for the remainder of the season, expect Zamula and Andre to be shifting around quite a bit, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's fair. Um, yeah, we're gonna talk more about Andre and Zamula, and we're gonna go through the returning line combination. So we'll get a little more in depth there. So I'll leave my comments on anything additional for that period. The other piece of news was Team Canada made their cuts, and unfortunately for Denver Barkey, he did not make the cut again. I think this one's a little surprising, not that surprising when you consider the fact that they're that talented on paper and they've already left off a lot of really good players, some better than Barkey, maybe
Zane Parekh,
younger.
right? Was left
What?
off. Wasn't Zane Parekh left off?
I think he might have been as well. I didn't check the entire final list of like guys who were left off, but I don't think Misa made it either, and he's like a goal a game. Yeah, just a good amount of players who, probably would make other countries teams, but Canada it kind of is what it is. They have an insane amount of talent,
Yeah,
and you can,
Parekh did miss, which is very strange.
yeah, yeah. I so there's
And Beckett Seneke too,
Well, yeah,
which
he wasn't even included.
which is crazy considering when he was drafted, right?
Yeah. It seems like they had something in mind of the type of team they wanted to build, and I think a guy like Jet Luchenko was probably very high on their list. Guys who are more two-way. Again, when you're playing against teams, especially like Finland and Sweden, and the United States, like these teams are going to be very good defensively. If you're playing somebody like Russia, a lot of times maybe you want to load up on scores because that's how Russia tends to win, is like outscore their competition. But, a team, especially like Finland and Sweden, like they're like D first type of teams. And it seems like Canada's kind of taking that model a little bit here. We're like, yeah, we're going to have scoring and all that, obviously, but we want specific guys for specific roles. And even Barkey's a good defensive player, but he's undersized. So maybe they were kind of that was kind of the thought there. But the other three did make it. Luchenko, Carson Bjarnason, who we suspect will be the starter for Team Canada. Not hearing a lot about that around, but I think that that's going to be like that surprise that everybody's like, Carson Bjarnason's the starter. And then obviously Oliver Bonk made it, who that's his second year in a row making it, who I think makes complete sense. He's going to be one of their better two-way guys on the back
Yeah,
end.
I think for Canada, they kind of have taken a little bit of a different approach in the sense that, like, usually most Canada teams very, very skill heavy, and they're going for the most skilled players on all lines. It seems like this team, they're kind of trying to look at how do we actually build a successful team for a tournament? Who's filling what role? You're actually looking at it in terms of building a legitimate team versus let's just get every single guy on this roster who has the highest point total, most skilled players, right? That's not typically the recipe for success sometimes. You need certain types of players to play with other types of players to make them successful. Like there has to be grinders that can get into the corners and do that digging and that board work to get
Yep.
the puck, to those scoring type of players. So I suspect that's maybe, something Canada might be taken into
Yeah.
consideration, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The other bit of news is Heikki Rohonen, the Flyers, what was he, third round pick last year?
Yeah.
Yeah, third round pick. He did make Finland's team, which is not really surprising. We know he was on the cusp of making it, but it was nice to see he was selected. And Jack Berglund also made Team Sweden. So I think we already talked about Berglund, but these are guys who are obviously pretty high in the Flyers prospect rankings. And I think Jack Berglund again he's gonna be severely underrated until people watch him play. Like I didn't even agree with the criticism that people had of him in Dev Camp. I don't care about his skating and all. Like none of that bothered me whatsoever.
Now that he has
What
new skates, though, it doesn't seem
Right,
to be an
yeah.
issue.
Yeah,
So
now he's not skating on one foot. But he's also a guy who obviously is now going to be playing in the Allsvenskan league. He did play 2 games there with no points. I did look into that. Um, but not that surprising that he made it either. I'm just like really excited because when we draft guys, a lot of people look at players for who they are. Like a guy like Ilya Paltov, who's like very flashy, right? But when I see that, I go like, okay, how is his game going to develop? It's almost like similar to Alexis Gendron, right? Like these guys clearly have the offensive upside. It is
Mhm.
there, but it takes so much more beyond the skill and the goal scoring to make the NHL because majority of guys who are goal scorers around the world will not be elite goal scorers at the NHL
You have to be able
level.
to do something else other than score in certain situations,
Right.
unless you're bringing scoring to a level that's very elite, right?
Right. So if you have like all of the other tools, right? And you have a scoring touch, which in Jack Berglund's case and Heikki Rahonen, they both have, right? Like you look to see how they all develop moving forward. And when you look at a guy like Jet Luchenko, it's like he has everything, just not a great shooter yet. And it's like, what man, if he just like gets better at shooting, which that's how I view everything with a growth mentality, right? Every season's a new iteration on their game. So, you try to pick guys who will evolve into pros. And I think when you look at guys like Rahonen and Jack Berglund, they both have the models of being
Yeah,
NHL
the
pro
floor the
players.
floor is there. Now, if they add more scoring ability to that floor, we will see, right? I think that's kind of what the Flyers are probably looking at, and they're probably working on themselves, and they probably realize that, hey, like for me to be an impact NHL player, I have these skills in the defensive aspects of things, but I do need to have a little bit more of a scoring touch to be effective, right?
Yeah. Like look at Noah Cates, who was a scorer in NCAA, and how he's evolved into a defensive center in the NHL. And I know people are low on him.
All the time that happens.
Yeah, but people are like so low on Noah Cates, and I'm like, I have no idea what people are talking about. I love
He's a
Noah
great
Cates.
utility player in terms
Well,
of what he can do for you in terms like with the little things, just defensively, PK. Like there's just so many things he brings other than the scoring, you
he
know?
he doesn't lose battles.
Yeah, I know. On the boards,
He
he's a
wins
very good forechecker.
every battle, and he's become a good face-off guy. Like nobody thought he would be a good face-off guy. It took him a year. This is kind of what I'm saying. It's like Again, I don't want to pick on Charlie O'Connor because I really like him and I'm a fan of his work. So I'm not. This is not me like criticizing Charlie O'Connor overall, but I was watching their show with him, Bill, and Kelly, and this is something you and I talk about, and they were talking about something that we criticize quite often, and they were talking about how the numbers show that players hit their peak at 22, 23. That is a complete line of horse shit, by the
That's
way.
a farce in the NHL.
100% untrue. I don't care what data you're looking at. 100%
All I'm gonna
untrue.
say, Yariv, is two words right now. Travis Sanheim. Did he
Well,
hit his peak at 22 or 23?
no
Right?
no player hits their peak at 22, 23. None. None. They all continue to evolve until they're like, realistically 30. They all continue to evolve. It's just, would their peak have ever even been high enough to be relevant to the NHL, which is what skews that data, is that they're taking all players, right? So yeah, some players will never be that good, but they might be better at defense or get better at certain aspects of their game. You know, maybe
Yeah,
they'll never get faster. Maybe they'll never get a better
but
shot.
also to
But
add, like I will say, if you are taking a certain subset of data, you have to be, cognizant of the fact that younger players didn't really start making it to the NHL like 21, 22, 23. Like it was unheard of an 18-year-old coming in 20, 30 years ago and making an NHL squad. Like we're now just seeing younger guys make it a lot earlier. So like if you take into account, well, of course, like you're not going to
because
have
of the
that same
salary
data.
cap.
Right, exactly. Of course, you're not going to have that same data because it's not really accurate if you take into account this has only been happening recently.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But it's also the concept that a guy stops developing in the very beginning of their NHL journey doesn't make any sense. And the reality is that most players continue to develop, and that's why you get guys like Anthony Richard, who's probably the best he's ever been right now, and probably should be playing in the NHL, not the
Look
AHL.
at Konechny, right? Like,
Right. There are more examples of players evolving in their mid 20s than there are not.
well, that's like saying Matvey Michkov in 2 years at 22 is
It's
done.
peaked. He's
Yeah, it's
done.
over. He's
Even I
downhill
point this out.
curve.
Even McDavid didn't do that. Kucherov didn't do that. None of these guys have done that. The best players in the world didn't
Sidney
peak at
Crosby,
22,
Alex
23.
Ovechkin. I mean,
Ovechkin is destroying it this year. He's in his 30s, absolutely crushing it. And he joined the league at 21 years old. And it's like they didn't peak.
Yep, yep.
It didn't peak. So a lot of these guys, you actually are watching them evolve. It's just the game is not based on, like, maybe they get slower of foot, but the entire game is not played just based on speed. It matters more today because you can't clutch and grab guys like you used to. You can't hook guys, right? So speed plays a larger factor, but you don't have to be the best player or the fastest player at all to be highly evolved and to be highly effective. It's just not true. So it's a lot of it is actually mental. And even with the scoring, and I wanted to say this earlier, when you think about guys like Ruhonen and Berglund or Luchenko, a lot of their scoring that will come from these guys is confidence. They also didn't come in and dominate their age group. Most guys are not Matvey Michkov. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
most guys have not been the best player in their age group every single time. Some guys evolve later. Like nobody knew Kucherov was going to be what he is today. They knew he was going to be a good player. They
Yeah.
knew that he had NHL
But
upside.
it's always what we've kind of talked about, right? Like development isn't a linear process. How many players have we seen potentially have struggles and then take steps forward? Like look at Cam York, for
Look
example,
at
right?
Connor Bedard.
Yeah, of course. He's having struggles right now as we speak. But I'm just saying, like in general, there's just too many examples to point out for me to just name guys of like players that I've personally seen struggle and then turn things around potentially. Like I'm just thinking back to Sean Couturier, not saying struggle, but like think about his career offensively. If the Flyers would have thought he peaked at 22, they never would have, kind of seen through his full development. They would have traded him away early on. Same even with the Braden Shen. Like there's just too many examples I can pick hat where it just doesn't make a lot of sense. But
100%, dude. Here, look, Martin Necas, 25 years old. How did
yeah,
he hit
exactly.
another level? By accident? Like, there's what I mean. These are not outliers. This is the path it is. That's like I still don't even understand how this concept has become so prominent.
It's just the data, right? It's a stupid fucking concept in my opinion, but what are you gonna do? I think there's a lot more actual um actual data looking at, okay, how many guys have gotten better from probably age 22 to 23, 24, 25 if you look at their point totals.
What?
I'd love to do some sort of study and go back and look at Flyers
Well,
players specifically like over the last 10 years
sure.
and look at like, oh, their point totals at 22 and then what was it at 23, 24, 25? Like, did they continue to get better? I feel like there's room to do that. Maybe one day I'll do that and do like a big
What
article. I think it'd be interesting.
what I think the number actually indicates is that players at 22, 23, you will know if they are probably NHL players or not. Not are they going to
That's
get
accurate.
better?
That's
It's
accurate.
like,
Yeah.
will I know by the age of 22, 23 if that guy actually has NHL abilities, right?
Well,
Like
that's when
maybe
you'll
he'll get better, but he might
typically
always be a swing guy,
that's
right?
when they'll typically make their debuts and see if they can stick or not. So that's valid, right?
Right. So I don't think that means they peaked. I think it means that that's where you can define whether they really will be good enough to be in the NHL.
Yeah.
And they will probably still get better, but they missed their window. Unless, like, again, a guy like Anthony Richard is a really good example of that, who probably missed his window of getting highlighted. And, like, if Richard did what he did with the Flyers at 23 and not 27, he wouldn't have been sent down.
They would have gave him more of an opportunity, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So, like, that's what I think that number actually indicates, not whether a player actually gets better or not, because I wouldn't be surprised if Anthony Richard's even better next year than he is this year, and he probably won't be playing for the Flyers. He'll probably be either leading some other AHL team or playing in the NHL. And again, when I look at Richard, I don't see a top six scorer in the league, but I do see a bottom six scorer, right? Which is where he is now. And I think he's shown flashes of that. He's made the NHL prior to that. It's just like you can kind of be like, okay, this guy probably will never be that good,
Yep.
right? He's
Yep.
still going to get better, but he's never going to be that good. And we can look at a guy like Adam Yinning. Like Yinning last year, from what we saw, that's probably what close to what Adam Yinning can be, but he can still be an NHL player. He can still improve marginally by 10, 15% and earn that bottom pairing role for an NHL team. We've seen it happen with other guys. Mark All is a guy who falls into that category. There's a bunch of NHL players who end up making their career later. Sean Walker, right? Like Sean Walker is not really a top four defenseman in the league. Like he's played better, but realistically, he's a bottom pairing, puck moving defenseman, and he can play well. But his game is not like drastically different than it was when he was 24. He's just improved mentally, positionally. He got better at things that really make a player better. And I think that is really the difference, that like physically, you're not going to mature beyond 23, 24 years old, right? Like you're not going to get faster, really. You're not going to get bigger and stronger beyond 25, really, not much, at least, maybe by 10% or whatever. But the mental aspect of the game, which is, I would argue, almost 50% of a player's success, is what really comes into play in those mid 20s. And so when I look at a guy like Jack Berglund, to bring it back, that's why I see like a Michael Hanzus, because I was like, I don't care, he's not fast. I was like, can he do everything else really well? I was like, I don't need him to be fast.
Yeah,
Can he
there's
win
certain
faceoffs? Can he
specifics
set
of his
people up?
game. There's certain specifics of his game that are going to make him a valuable asset, right? It's not all about the
Right.
scoring. So
I don't think when they drafted Jack Berglund, they were anticipating a top six
they weren't.
forward. They
They
were
weren't. So
anticipating a playmaking two-way third line center with
yep.
size, right? So right now he's nowhere close to ready. And
But
I'd
yeah,
love to see him come over.
we'll see how these guys kind of play in the World Juniors. It'll be interesting. There's a lot of Flyers prospects to keep an eye on, so it'll be fun to
Yeah.
track them, right?
Yeah, the reality is most players who get drafted don't have success in the NHL, or have a very small amount of success.
20 to
in the NHL.
30% of guys you draft will probably make it, maybe even less than that.
I'd say it's probably close to 20%, but Pareto principle, 80-20 rule.
Yeah.
It's probably somewhere around 20%. Okay. Our next thing is something that Vasili pointed out.
Yeah,
I'll
sure.
let you go more into depth to it, but again, it's Flyers improvement on 5 versus 5 goals for as of December 15th. They are ranked 10th in the league right now. Some other surprises on there. The Penguins are ranked 5th.
Well, I have
Um,
something to point out that's really interesting,
yeah, go for
actually.
it.
So this is from JFresh, hockey on Twitter. So shout out to JFresh. He's awesome. He puts this stuff up like weekly, so that's kind of why we bring it up every week, with the new updated stats. But essentially, it's team 5-on-5 goals for, or 5-on-5 expected goals for per 60. As of December 15th, the Flyers are 10th in the league with a 2.59 5-on-5 expected goals for per 60. Essentially, what that is meaning is that typically, they're controlling more of the high danger quality chance creation, shot battle, and typically just creating more chances that should equate to expected goals for, should have a greater opportunity at them kind of scoring goals, creating more offense. One thing that I thought was real interesting is out of the top 10, there is six met or no five of six metro team or five metro teams are in the top 10 here. So there's Carolina at 2.97, Washington at 2.95, the Rangers at 2.71, Penguins at 2.66, Devils 2.65, and the Flyers at 2.59 at 10th. So that's yes, six, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Sorry, I can't count, guys, but yeah, that's six Metro teams in the top 10 there, which kind of shows that the Metro, I mean, uh, seems to be doing well in terms of like expected goals for per 60, and it is really tight right now. So it does make a lot of sense that the Metro's super close together, just considering all the teams are kind of producing at the same rate, with 5-on-5 expected goals for per 60. So I just thought that was something interesting to kind of mention.
It's definitely interesting, and like I suspect the Penguins have been scoring a lot. They're not playing great defense. They did have 9 goals against
Yeah, they've been
Montreal the
potting a
other
lot of
day.
goals. So
Yeah, so it's interesting to see. It's good to see the Flyers are at least scoring at 5-on-5 again, and they're kind of and we see it visually.
it shows an
Um,
improvement, right? Like we talked
well,
earlier.
trending more to what they did last year too.
Exactly. Well, I think that's what we're seeing, right? We're seeing a little bit more of that team from last year, not completely, but we're just seeing the Flyers actually control more of the play at 5-on-5. And that speaks to why their 5-on-5 expected goals for per 60 is so high right now and top 10 in the league, right? Because if they weren't creating and controlling play and dictating things at 5-on-5 these past couple of weeks here, they wouldn't have these metrics to kind of back that up, right? So not only are we seeing it on the ice because you can visibly see that the team is just looks like they're moving in transition faster, moving up the ice with the puck faster, just getting more quality chances at 5-on-5 in general, but the numbers also back that eye test up. So that's kind of what we try to do on this podcast, just in terms of like the metrics and the data and the analytics. Like analytics, I mean, I can see why some people don't like it as a tool, but I think it's something, if you're just using solely the analytics, then I can see why, right?
Yeah,
But the way we try to use it is, okay,
retrospectively.
is what I'm seeing on the ice also matching what I'm seeing in the data, which in
Yeah.
this case, yes.
Yeah, and I talk about it all the time. It's the same way it's used in the tech world. It's used properly when it's used as a retrospective tool where you make a decision and then you measure that decision, right? So
Exactly.
a team like the Flyers adjust their 5-on-5 play, look to improve it, and then they can track to see if they actually have been improving it. As far as prediction wise, my faith in analytics is not anywhere near as high as other people's, because I find it usually misses
The models I'm not too
factors.
interested in, but it's more like just like the stats like this. I think that you could piece together with your own
Yeah,
eye test that makes it
yeah.
more valuable, right? But
There,
if the problem is most people aren't using it that way, they're just looking straight at the data and being like, this is it.
correct. Yeah, and I hate that stuff. And it does work in certain contexts, but much smaller contexts than it does work, or than it doesn't work. So like in certain games it'll work, like sports, it works better than others. Like baseball, it's highly more effective. Baseball is more like poker than it is like a sport when you consider like pitching and how pitching operates and pitch counts, and there's more predictability there. In a game like hockey, even a game like basketball, it's going to be a lot more difficult to predict.
Just so much
Um,
unpredictability. You could have like a
right.
bounce go in
There's
randomly that a goalie would never let in.
right.
it's 99 out of 100. He'd save it. He lets one squeaker in, right? Like it's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
a lot to kind of be, thinking about just in terms of what could happen in the game versus other sports.
Yeah.
So
I do want to go back real quick because I just saw a piece of news here, which I do think is important for the Flyers.
sure, yeah.
It was announced that Guelph Storm has traded Cam Allen to the London Knights, which is interesting because we thought that that would be where Jet Luchenko goes. They traded away a haul to get Cam Allen. They traded. These are other teams' picks, but North Bay's second round pick in 2026, Niagara's second round pick in 2026, Sarnia's third round pick in 25, Niagara's third round pick in 27, Erie's fourth round pick in 27, London's fourth round pick in 28, and London's fifth round pick in 28. So Cam Allen has been, outside of Luchenko, has been the best player on the Guelph Storm. Definitely the best defenseman on the team. He was carrying the team when Luchenko wasn't around. Um, Now, Jet Luchenko is the top prized player from that group, but the reason I say this because they've been making a lot of moves. So this is not the only trade they made. They've actually made 4 or 5
This
trades.
is writing on the wall for me, Yariv. If they're
Yeah,
making these many trades, it's probably likely that Luchenko might be next, I'd imagine. I don't know
yeah,
if that's the case, but it seems like, they're selling off guys. Certain contenders in the OHL there are looking to add. I know Steve mentioned Brampton as a
yeah,
potential
yeah. It could
suitor.
be. Is
So
that where Misa
maybe
plays?
I can't remember if it's Misa.
No, it's not. It's Porter Martone. Is it
Yeah, there
Martone?
we go.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Um,
And apparently, I mean, that'd be an interesting combination. So we'll see, right? Like those two players, I think stylistically could fit really well. I don't know, obviously, if Brampton will make the trade, but I do expect Luchenko to be on the move just with the way, Guelph's operating. I think it kind of speaks to it, right?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that's going to be a big deal for a guy like Luchenko because we really want to see him on a more competitive team and maybe even a chance to fight for the Memorial Cup. Obviously, he's going to be in the WJC, which is great. And we just want to see him get more action against better players because he's already borderline NHL ready. And while it's nice, on one hand, it's nice to see him on a team that like really, really needs him. But it would be really nice to see him kind of complemented by maybe some elite prospects,
Yeah.
and see what kind of numbers he can
You
put up.
also want to see him play in meaningful games in the playoffs and things like
Right.
that. That's when you find out a lot about
So true.
players.
Yeah,
So
dude. Exactly. The WGC, the playoffs, the Memorial Cup, these are all things we want to see him play in. Because realistically, this is most likely his last year of juniors.
probably.
There is a chance he doesn't make the Flyers next year. It's probably unlikely. He's probably like 90, let's say 90% on the Flyers next year at this point. So
I'd imagine, yeah.
yeah, considering he made the team early. I did think about this the other day though, like if the Flyers were playing better as a team when he was on the team, because it wasn't his fault, like would he still be with the Flyers? Because they were struggling as a collective group, not Luchenko was struggling. They kind of moved him away from what was going on with the Flyers. And he probably would have had better offensive success if he was
It,
like,
it's possible.
yeah, it's all should have. I'm glad what happened. I didn't want him here. I'm not this year at least.
I think it
So
works out for the best in all
yeah,
situations. Like I personally think that either way they were evaluating him in a silo. Like I don't think the team's success was
yeah,
factored
but what if he
into the
produced?
decision.
You see what I'm saying?
If he produced, it's totally different though. That changes the
Because
conversation.
no one was producing
Yeah.
when he was here. It was
Well,
like
then
Konechny and
that's a
Michkov.
different situation for sure.
Now, like, even Noah Cates is scoring. Scott Laughton had a 4 goal game the other day. You know what I mean? Like, guys are Sanheim's offensive game came out. Like, it took a little bit for this team to get going offensively this year, unlike last year. So, I think it did happen for the best, to your point. But I'm excited. I'm excited to see if Luchenko gets moved and if we can see him in another position with, maybe a powerhouse team. That'd be nice. All right. Next, we're going to do a brief Tortorella quote. Um, and it's regarding the Michkov. Actually, you know what? I'll let you read it since you brought up the quote here by
Yeah, it's a really
Kevin Kurz.
funny it's a really funny quote. I mean, I'm sure everybody's heard it by now. I just thought it's something interesting to mention. This is Tortorella's attempt or Tortorella's quote on Matvey Michkov's Michigan attempt. So he stated, yeah, I've lost the battle, right? I don't think it should be in our game, but I've lost that battle. I've talked to Matvey early in the year when he was doing it every time. It was just turnovers. The thing I want Mish to understand is he's such a good player moving a puck and passing a puck when he's behind the net, especially. He's dangerous to make plays. What am I going to do? Say don't do it? What I did was I said you need to understand that there are other plays to be made there too, because a number of the times he tried it early in the year, um, all they were turnovers. So yeah, I've lost a damn battle with that. I'm not going to try to fight it. I don't think it should be in our game, but it is what it is. So I mean, it's a classic Torch quote just in terms of the Michigan. We kind of know all his feelings with Zegers and things like that. But once again, I think it's interesting to bring up just because it shows Tortorella's ability to evolve as a coach. Like if he was
Yeah.
dead set against this, he would have went up to Mitchkov and be like, "No, you're not doing it. You're not trying it." But even he realizes that, hey, you know what? There's certain situations where this actually can be a scoring chance. I think he would prefer Mitchkov to pass from behind the net just based on that quote and kind of his passing ability from, that area and how much scoring opportunities he can really create from there, because we've seen already in a short amount of time with Mitchkov that he can create a lot from behind the net. But you have to factor in that, if there are situations where players are covered up in front, that could be the best opportunity to score. And sometimes goalies aren't always, prepared for something like that, or they might not be thinking that, oh, this guy's going to try the Michigan on me right now. And it's an easy way to slam dunk a goal if you can kind of get it off. So I can see why there's certain situations that Tortorella is saying, hey, like if there isn't open passes in front or open lanes and everything's covered, I have no problem with you doing this. Just don't make it a habit in the sense that I don't want you to do this and just cause a bunch of turnovers. And that's fair.
Yeah, and I think what he was trying to also point out is like, do it in a smart way. It's like do stupid things in a smart way,
Exactly.
right? One that won't lead to a turnover. I will say to Tortorella's point, it's a low chance
It's a
opportunity.
low percentage move.
Right. It's a
Yeah,
low percentage play. Having said that, you have a complete outlier of a player in Michkov. So it's a higher percentage opportunity when it's in his hands because
exactly.
he's
Yeah.
one of like 10 guys in the world who can pull this off.
In
Um,
game, exactly.
right. I mean, I think it's happened 8 times or something like that.
Not
I'll give
very
credit to Bill
often.
Matz who did the research on that. I think it happened like 8 times over the past like 20 some years. So it's not a high percentage opportunity, but if anybody could pull it off, it's Michkov. So you just want him to do it in a smart way. And we saw less opportunities of it. And the best opportunity we saw that Michkov take of it is the recent one. So you can tell that Michkov is listening to Torts, but he's still going to go for it if he has it. And I think you're right. I think it also shows the give and take that Tortorella is willing to do with a player where he's willing to state his opinion on it, right? But he's not going to punish you unless it like leads to a turnover that, it was like a really bad play that you end up losing the game because you went for that high risk opportunity. I don't think Tortorella is against flash. He's against low percentage opportunities.
Well,
Uh,
he's just saying that, hey, like if there's a better pass to make from behind the net at that particular time, make the pass. Don't do the
right.
Michigan, because the chances are if that pass connects, there's going to be a way greater scoring opportunity, which I mean makes a lot of sense, right?
Yes. So next, I want to give credit to Jordan Hall on this because he's the one who had the tweet, and he's usually really good at this. Usually it's either Jordan Hall or Charlie O'Connor who are
Do the
tweeting out,
lines.
yeah,
Yeah,
or doing
exactly.
out the line combinations. Um, so Jordan Hall did say that the lines are the same at practice today as they were on Monday, same as we saw in the game. The Flyers did throw out some other combinations. Typically, Tortorella will do that in game if the team is struggling to put the puck in the net. Which, while the Flyers did play very well against, I don't think they played a poor game at all against Minnesota. Tortorella said that himself. That he actually thought they outplayed Minnesota in certain aspects. They had higher, the larger amount of high scoring danger. Oh my God, high danger scoring opportunities. Um, so he did go back to his lines. So again, the lines are as follows: Farabee, Couturier, TK, Tippett, Frost, Michkov, Forrester, Cates, Brink, Lawton, Paling, Hathaway. Defense: York, Sanheim, then Zamula, Ristolainen, and Sealer and Drysdale. And we mentioned already that Andre looks to be a scratch again here. I believe it's his third game in a row.
Yep,
Um,
exactly.
and I don't know. I don't really have any problems with what's going on here. Again, we kind of talked about the Zamula Andre stuff already. What interests me the most is the effectiveness of the Tippett Frost Michkov combination. I still stand by that. I think Michkov would be best playing with TK and Couturier. Having said that, and I would love to see Farabee on the line with Frost and Tippett still. But because TK is so effective on the right side and so is Michkov, this makes complete sense to me. Is why they're going with this combination in the top six, and obviously the chemistry that is starting to form between Michkov and Tippett can't be ignored either because Tippett's been coming out of his shell a lot more lately and putting up goals. So all of that makes sense. And then um, the most interesting thing to me is the Forrester Cates Brink line has been consistent. Tortorella has been kind of raving about this line's ability to check. He complimented Brink the other day on his ability to check, how much better he's gotten at it.
He's
We
been
already
doing a
know.
lot better with the board battles. At least that's
Yes.
what I've noticed. And he's looked quicker, so that's going to help you kind of get your stick in first, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we know Forrester's already really good, and we already at checking, we already talked about Noah Cates. It's like almost unbeatable at this
That's a
point.
perfect third line, just in the sense for me that like you have your two young guys in Forster and Brink that also have chemistry because they played together in the AHL. So you kind of keep them together. It's just a great combination of players just in terms of how you're going to put a line together because you have Brink that's kind of your more like skill guy, flash guy. He's going to maybe set things up more for players on that line. You have Forster, who's your shooter, but he's also good defensively on the boards. And then you have Cates, that's kind of your defensive whiz, though he can also be a great forechecker and help sustain offensive pressure. So in terms of like a third line that could be a checking line, but also chip in some offense, I think it's a really good combination of three players.
Yeah. And I think Cates is his offensive game, I think he's more snake bit. I actually expect him to be a better scorer throughout his career than what he's shown this
10 to
year.
15 goals a season is kind of my thought
Yeah,
process.
yeah. I think that 35, 40 point guy is definitely in his wheelhouse. Same thing we saw with a guy like Scott Lawton, who took a while to get going offensively as well. But I thought it was most interesting because we talked about this in the offseason.
Yeah.
How I specifically called him like the kids line, and I was like, I really wanted to see Brink and Forrester together, and it's working. Um, yeah, actually, a lot of the combinations that you and I have discussed are the ones that are working, to be honest with you.
Well, we talked about
Um,
Couturier, Farabee, and Konechny, and
yeah.
that's been working too. I just think at this point, like the staff is seeing that they have combinations that have developed chemistry and are working on certain nights. Like not all of these lines are going at the exact same time every night, but it's never going to be that way, right? Like, and you're not just going to break up a whole combination of lines because one line isn't going. So I think the good thing with these combos is they've found a consistency in the sense that every couple of games, one line here is stepping up and kind of carrying the mail, and that's what you need,
Hmm.
right? And that's essentially, what is gonna help you have success in this playoff race, right? Like there's gonna be situations where every night it can't just be Michkov or Couturier or Konechny or those top of the lineup guys. You're going to need guys in the bottom of the lineup to step up at certain points. And that's kind of what's been happening for the Flyers over these last couple of weeks, where you're seeing Forster and Brink and Kate step up, or certain nights you're seeing, Garnett Hathaway have a big goal or Scott Lawton have a 4 goal night. And it's kind of taking the pressure off those top of the lineup
Yeah,
guys,
it's
right?
a must. It's a absolute must. I completely
You
agree with
need to
you.
have depth scoring in a
Yeah.
sense where like it's not going to be every night that your top line's going to have a 5 point night between three players.
Yeah, and I think the defense is structured that way too, with Drysdale being on that third pairing with Sealer, Ristolainen with either Zamula or Andre, and then York and Sanheim. It's like every one of these lines should be effective. Doesn't mean they're going to be the best line, better than everybody on the other team, but there is a piece on every line that makes sense to where they are, and you can win the line combination battles,
Yeah.
which is key for a team like the Flyers, which obviously is not built like Tampa Bay um, or like Colorado, right? Where they can just like load up a top line and just score a goal, a guaranteed goal from that line every night. They're getting close to that point, closer than people realize. But uh, it's going to take time for them to get to that point. They still lack like a true dynamic number one center. If they
Yeah.
found that, and then you can shift a guy like Couturier down, I think you're looking at. I truly believe when I look at the Flyers lineup, I'm like they are one star center, and again, it's very difficult to find, but one star center away from being a playoff team. Not necessarily like the best team in the playoffs
But
or a
bona fide
guarantee.
making it every season,
Yes.
essentially. Yeah, I hear that.
And I think that's why I didn't love like the idea of trading for David Juracek because I'm like, I'm not focused on that. I'm looking to see can we package, and we'll talk. We got trade rumors coming up too. Can we package that right package of those assets we are willing to move for that guy that we can build around? Is he going to become available? Like Natchez was available, or might even still be available, and I really like Natchez, but again, he doesn't necessarily fill our top line center need. We need to package a deal for that. Like that should be our focus, and I think that's what this team is lacking. And we'll shift everybody else in a proper position because I don't think this team is that far away from being built to be effective. I think like Farabee's numbers are down, but I don't think he's playing to his numbers. I think he's played better.
Well, he's creating a lot of scoring chances for his teammates. I just think he personally isn't scoring himself.
Well, he's
And there's
getting
something to be
going
said
now.
for
He's
that. Yeah.
Yeah, as of late, he's starting to put up points. Um,
I just
I'm
mean
a
as a whole this season, right? Like
Yeah, yeah,
people were probably
absolutely.
expecting a little bit more, but I think he's coming around for
I
sure.
was, and a guy like Mitchkov, it's just his rookie year, right? And a guy
Yeah.
like Bobby Brink is going to get better.
Well,
And
something
far,
crazy to point out that like Mitchkov, since he got scratched, has 17 points in 16 games. So
yeah,
it just shows that that didn't affect him whatsoever. To be honest, he got more impactful after the scratch,
yeah. Well,
just with more time.
are
And
you saying scratching works? Are you saying John Tortorella knows what he's doing? Is that what you're trying to say?
he might be, but
He
I'm
might
just
know what he's
saying,
doing.
as the season goes along, gets more familiar. The fact that we're seeing him produce even more and get more comfortable, not surprising to me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that is also a big, maybe the biggest part of the entire thing. And then, a guy like Forrester is going through a sophomore slump. Not that surprising. We'll see how he finishes the season. Brink is evolving. Like, I don't know. I see a team on here that is really evolving in the right way. And this rebuild is working. And you look at a team like Detroit, who's been rebuilding quite longer than the Flyers. Um, and just show like, they took a bunch of guys at the top of the draft, hasn't gotten them out of where they're at. Um, and I'm hoping that Tortorella can for the time that he's here can do good enough job setting the baseline for what is to come, which I don't think is that far away anymore. I think it seems further away to people than it actually is, and I think people should be frustrated because nobody wants to see their team be mediocre or bad for long periods of time. So I don't judge anybody for getting frustrated or demanding trades of players and all that stuff. Like I totally get it. Um, and I understand why people have those expectations. But again, we're on this podcast to try to ask people to be a little more patient than they normally want to be. Because it sucks. It sucks watching your team,
Yeah.
root for a team that's not
But I would
winning
say
all
the
the time.
time is coming where the Flyers will be making some sort of move. Like I said, like the writing's on the wall, in the sense that I've said it many times, you have 6 draft picks coming up. The chances of a team taking all 6 draft picks in 2 rounds, I don't know, that's real slim to me. So we'll kind of see what happens with those picks and kind
Yeah.
of what moves might be up Danny Briere's sleeve here.
Yeah, we will see. So the other line combination thing, and this is a little late to the punch. It's already kind of been out there, but uh, Tortorella has essentially named his rankings of his goaltenders with putting Ersson at obvious number one, which we already knew, and then he named Kolosov as the clear-cut backup, and Fedotov being number three. Now he did commend Fedotov and said that he played better. This is how he views it. He just had a press conference today as we record where he talked about it. And he said, look, a lot can change. Ersson still had some injury problems, and he's not 100% sure if Ersson will be healthy, and knows that Fedotov needs to play. So maybe there is some conversation about, like we said, conditioning stint in the minors, maybe a waive. Again, his contract kind of makes him waiver exempt. There's still a risk of
No
him
one's
getting
gonna take
taken.
that, I don't
But
think.
if it was the final year, I think somebody would take it. But considering there's an additional year of 3.25
That's the
million,
reason, right? It's just
yeah,
like
I
nobody
think
wants to be on the hook for that because they probably have goaltenders in their own system they'd rather give a chance than pick up a $3.25 million
right.
tab,
And
unknown. So
and you might be in desperation mode this year, but you're not necessarily going to be in desperation mode next year, right? And you want to leave that roster, um, that cap space open to sign a starting goaltender, right? Because it's a good amount of money that could pay for most of a starting goaltender in the league, which is probably going to be around $5 million a year. Um, so yeah, so not that surprising. I think the eye test has proven that. I actually think Kolosov has been better than Fedotov too, and I think it's actually really exciting when you really look at it because Kolosov is so young that
yeah,
he is doing what Ersson did for Carter Hart. Um, and he's not playing as well as Ersson did, but he is getting a lot better. And
he's
if you
steady.
take if you look at his recent sample versus his previous sample, you have to count it all because it all matters. But he's trending absolutely in the right direction where that NHL potential starter is in him. I don't know if he'll hit it, but uh, what it looks to me is at least for the near future, the Flyers do have stability in net with Kolosov and Ersson being here, and they don't need to rush Carson Bjarnason into the league.
Yeah, I agree. I think just in terms of the eye test, if anybody's watching, it's pretty easy and clear cut to see that Kolosov's been better than Fedotov. I think there's
Yeah.
just a little bit of shakiness still with Fedotov where they're not sure what they're going to get from a game to game basis. I think that's the, um, that I think that's what kind of drove them to make this decision is that there's more consistency in Kolosov's game right now from a game to game than Fedotov's game. Like one game, Fedotov looks unreal. The next game, he's letting in floaters from the blue line. I just think the team can't rely on that, unfortunately. And that's why, Kolosov gets that number two moniker just because he's been more consistent. And I think an easy thing to look at is the win-loss record, right? There was a point in the season where Kolosov was 0-4. Now he's 4-5. So that just shows that he's kind of, been backstopping the team to a lot more wins here in recent games. And I will just say, in terms of his play, like, first of all, the lateral movement is insane in terms of how quick this guy can move from post to
Yeah.
post and square up the shooters. So that's one thing. And I think that's also a big factor because he looks quicker than Fedotov in the net, for sure. And two, right? Like Urson also, there's no telling what's going to happen with him. So I think they want to just make sure that if Urson does go down again, Kolosov's essentially going to be the number one. So they want to get him as many reps as possible, right? So I think doing that at the NHL level versus the AHL level is probably smart in case there is another injury with Urson and you have your guy that you're hoping to jettison into that type of role ready, right? If it does
Yeah.
occur. And for Fedotov, I mean, what's likely going to happen is the conditioning stint. Like, there's really no other thing for them to do. They're probably going to send him down for the conditioning stint, leave him down there as I think it's a 2 week period, as much as they can, get him as many games as they can, and then potentially maybe send him down for a full time situation. But I do think they're just waiting on that to ensure that Urson's healthy. But the numbers speak for themselves, right? Like, so far in 10 games, Kolosov's got an 889 save percentage. Um, Fedotov in 10 games has an 877 save percentage. So he's been better by the numbers. Not by a lot, but he has been. And when you look at that, I think that's probably a big factor in it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. The numbers and the eye test both pass Kolosov, and again,
It's a no-brainer.
his natural skill is really good. So we'll see how they continue to develop him. And the good news is the likelihood of Kolosov leaving seems slim to none at this point. So that's also great.
Which is great, yeah.
Yeah.
Considering like everything that was happening with him to start the year, right?
Yeah. Totally. So yeah, just want to take a moment to remind everybody, please like and subscribe. Um, hit the notification bell for notifications of when we release these episodes. And for the audio version, go to Spotify and iTunes and give us a rating and a follow there as well if you can. Best way to support us. Thank you. I want to move this Tony D conversation up
Yeah,
one.
let's do it.
Yeah,
Do you
so
have the tweet, Yariv, ready?
I do. Let me open up. I'm gonna read the tweet because it's really stupid. Um,
Oh man.
so Dom Lucian of, I think he's still part of the Athletic,
I
right?
believe so.
Yeah. So his tweet is, and I'll read the entire thing here, but I've seen all the backlash, and all I can say is I'm
And
sorry.
wait, sorry, just to cut you off before you
Sure.
start, just for context for
Oh yeah,
everybody.
yeah, good idea.
Dom essentially and Tony had a back and forth on Twitter. He was basically calling TDA a guy that was lucky to play in the league for a certain amount of years and that he should be happy that he like got this amount of money and that he's been like a defensive liability. And then Tony's like, well, kind of firing back at him and saying, "Hey, like let me come on your podcast. We can hash it out face to face." And that's essentially what happened.
Yeah. So I've seen all the backlash and all. So Dom was going to have this conversation, and then he made this tweet. I have seen all the backlash, and all I can say is I am sorry. Everyone who voiced their displeasure is right, and I've decided not to go on on the What Chaos show with Tony. Um, and then I'll read the full write up here that he wasted everybody's time writing. After spending Saturday morning dunking on Tony D'Angelo and DJ and Pete on Tony D'Angelo, DJ, and Pete have asked me if I was willing to join the What Chaos podcast with Tony. I'm a big fan of what they do and their show and made an error of judgment saying yes. I said yes to DJ and Pete, but I shouldn't have said no, but I should have said no to Tony. I should have had stronger judgment. I should have stopped the idea in its tracks. So pathetic. Uh, at the time, I was swept up in the moment, the opportunity to on Tony face to face, dunk on an NHL player.
I'm sure he would have. I'm sure he would have dunked on him face to face when he met him.
Right, yeah, complete dunk. He's Michael Jordan out there. Was hard to pass up, and I thought it would be funny. That was a moment of
Uh,
weakness
uh,
that I regret. This is
to
unbelievable.
me, is there more?
Yeah, yeah. The
Okay.
hubris is unbelievable.
Okay.
It was yeah. It's like, is there more? This is funny. It was a selfish thought that helps no one. If I'm normalizing giving Tony a prominent platform, uh, that he does not deserve, given how obviously problematic he has been in the past and continues to be. I should have not given the conversation with him any more oxygen, even if the intent behind it was framed around a debate between analytics and the eye test, which would have been interesting. With the goal of reducing hostility before the podcast, I absolutely should not have used the phrase common ground, given with what Tony stands for. I know a lot of you are extremely disappointed in agreeing in me agreeing to be on the podcast with Tony. I know a lot of you are angry, and I helped give him a platform. I'm pretty sure he's got more followers than Dom. I read those and only felt that the same disappointment and anger towards myself. I never even heard of Chaos Podcast, by the way. But I've heard of Tony towards myself because of you were all completely justified in feeling that way. I made a mistake and genuinely feel dumb for not realizing it was a mistake at the time. I am deeply sorry to everyone who's rightfully felt betrayed by my poor decision making. I have no excuse for my lack of consideration here. I'm truly sorry for letting you all down. It will not happen again. Do you want to
Okay.
say something
So
first?
the first thing I have to say about this all is like it's way blown out of proportion, obviously. Like the one thing I want to say as
Oh
well is
yeah, it's like
like,
he's talking to a guy who executed people in
yeah,
public or something.
I don't know, man. Like my thought process is first of all how he's saying, oh, it would have been great to meet him face to face and dunk on him. Like, dude, I guarantee you when you would have met him face to face or like talked to him, like your whole makeup would have changed. You would have been acting the way you
100%.
were on Twitter. You would have been like,
100%.
"Hey, Tony, like sorry about the misunderstanding." Like it's total bullshit. Like that you would have had the same energy that you did during your Twitter conversation on the podcast with a professional hockey player. Um, my other thing is just like you are a professional journalist for a living that covers the sport of hockey, right? So like how is you getting on professional hockey podcast, What Chaos, that is part of the All City Network. How is you going on a podcast, doing your job, and interviewing a guy that used to be in the NHL for years and is still a professional hockey player? How is that offending anybody? Like, you're a journalist who covers hockey. You're going on a podcast to interview a hockey player. What's it offending? Like, he might have different political views than you. He might have done some shit in the locker room that you're really unaware of because you were never there in the actual experience to know what he did. Sure, everybody can have differing opinions, differing, viewpoints on things. What does that mean? Like, why does that make it unallowable to get on a podcast and talk to somebody that might have a different viewpoint than you? Like, maybe Tony's a prick, maybe he's an asshole. I don't really know the guy, like, or what he's done. Sure, but like, why is you going on a podcast talking to the guy? Like, why does there need to be an apology tweet for that? Like, I don't fucking get it, man. Like,
I
I
think
don't know
I
what
think it
to
makes
say about
Dom
it.
look very bad. Very, very bad. I
But
don't think he has
it just doesn't make a lot of sense. I don't get the reasoning behind the tweet. Like, what's the point of the tweet that he put out?
uh
He's pandering.
trying to look better, like he's on the right side of history, which usually shows that you're on the wrong side of history.
But it's
I
just
think
like,
it's
if the guy was so problematic and a terrible person, like, he had all those incidents happen. He took a year off. He took time to reflect, rehabilitated himself, apparently. Who knows, really? But like, if he was such a terrible guy, like, no NHL team after that stuff would have ever signed him again. No team in professional hockey would have ever signed him again. Yet here he is in the KHL making millions of dollars playing hockey. So like, my thing is just like, I don't get it. I just don't understand, man.
yeah. I don't understand the hubris to think that you're better than him. And one dunking on an NHL caliber player, a professional hockey player, about how you know more than him.
When you've
When
never
you're a
potentially played at that level
yeah,
before.
and
Yeah.
you're a journalist. I just found the entire thing pathetic. I think the way he talked about Tony is pathetic. I think he acted cowardly. Um, I think challenging somebody to a debate and then backing out of the debate and saying, "Oh, I'm a better person than you," shows that you are not a better person than Tony.
It just makes it
Um,
seem that you're scared to have the debate.
yeah, he probably would lose the debate to Tony. I think that's quite obvious that it would not, and it wouldn't. Dom would not walk away from that debate looking good.
Well, like, I want
Uh,
to say, like we said before, right? Like, I respect what Dom does in terms of like the analytics models that he puts together. I respect that it takes a lot of hard work. But you putting those models together
it doesn't mean shit to me personally.
but yeah, but it doesn't mean that you know how to play hockey better than a guy that actually played in the fucking NHL, man. Like, I don't
Yeah,
care what your model says.
he's a
The guy that played
top
in the
draft pick.
But either way, the guy that played in the NHL knows more about hockey than you, bro.
Yes,
That's
who has
all I have to say.
friends in the NHL. Um, yeah, I just thought the entire thing was ridiculous. I think you're lording over people that you have no right to lord over. I think you think that you're a better person than him, and I think that's pathetic. Um, yeah, just everything about it bothered
We just
me.
brought this up because we want
Um,
to laugh at it, to be honest, everyone.
yeah,
So
when I told Vasili this, like I responded to Tony. I said, "You're welcome on our podcast anytime." They both are, first of all. Not that either one of them are coming on here. I would like to
yeah,
get Tony on here more than Dom, because Tony played for the Flyers. That's more relevant to me, and carries a lot more cachet and weight than somebody who is in journalism or media. Um, and yeah, I thought it was incredibly pathetic, and I think I think we're moving away from this age. If you look at the tweet, he was ratioed in it, so he did not get the commending response
yeah,
that he thought
he
he
got
would get.
dummied. Most people were just like, "What's happening? You're just going on a podcast to talk about hockey, dude." Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't know.
and making it seem like Tony D'Angelo needs to be like excommunicated from the world,
Like, it makes it seem like the guy should be in jail or something, or
and
he committed a crime. Like,
right, like literally, the guy did
Uh,
nothing illegal, nothing that would warrant him being kicked out of the country or put in jail. Or it's like you're probably the same caliber of
but hey,
person that
man,
he is.
excommunicado, not
Right.
allowed.
It was one of the dumbest things I've ever seen. I have to say, as far as like hockey journalism stuff,
Yeah, it's
one
pretty
of
high
the
up there.
dumbest things I have seen. It actually reminded me when EJ Radic freaked out about Ivan Provorov not wanting to do the Pride Night thing, and told him to get out of the country. And all I could think of, I was like, you do not even realize how bad you look saying. And by the way, that Pride Night thing is gone. And it's not gone because just Provorov requested that it be gone. It's because a lot of other people clearly in the NHL who are religious or do not back that concept didn't want to be forced into it. Provorov was just one of the only people who stood up and said, no, I don't want to do it. And he did it quietly and respectfully in the background, which is why his coach defended him when he did it. And it's like, I don't know. I just feel like it's such a delusional tweet. Like that's all I thought when I
Yeah,
saw it.
it's
I was like,
just
you
it's
are
not.
delusional,
I
dude.
saw it and literally was like, "Is this even real life?"
Yeah.
Like that was my
Yeah.
reaction. I'm like, "What is this,
Yeah.
man? This is
Like,
hilarious."
I'm not saying anybody has to like Tony D'Angelo. I'm
You
not
don't
saying you
have to
gotta
like
like
him at
him.
all. He could, to be like I said, I don't know the guy. He could be a real asshole. I have no idea about
Yeah.
him. I
Well,
don't
we
know
won't
Dom.
won't know now. Though I've
I
never
don't,
seen him act like an asshole.
either way, I don't know Dom either. He could be a real nice guy, a real asshole. I don't know any of these people personally. So how can I make a comment on them? And that's also what I would say to Dom. Like, do you know this guy personally? So how can you make this judgment if you don't know him
Well, he's not gonna know him
realistically?
now.
Well, for sure. And I also just think in terms of if you're a career hockey journalist and your career is covering hockey and you have an opportunity to go on a very nationally known podcast to talk hockey with a prominent, former NHL player,
To debate something you believe in,
yeah,
too.
how are you going to deny that chance? It just doesn't
You
make a lot of
you were
sense from a career
actually
perspective,
you
right?
were actually if you did come in and debate that well, which I don't think he is capable of doing. I'll make that very
That's
clear.
probably why he
I,
backed out of it. Yeah.
that's probably the truth. I think he would have lost that debate, but if he did do a good job debating the
Think
eye
about what
test
that would
versus the
do for his
analytics,
career over the
right?
long span,
And your
right?
community of, but no, not with Tony D'Angelo because he's Hitler now. It's like, dude, it's like this is so 2020, and it was stupid in 2020 as well. It was stupid back then. It's even looks even dumber now, because I do not think
Yeah.
like again, even if you don't like Tony, to think that this was a and I saw somebody else tweet, some girl tweet out this whole long thing about how he did the right thing and I'm just like, you're also a loser. I don't have any patience for this type of shit. You have to be an actual criminal, charged criminal that did terrible things for me to say, hey, maybe you shouldn't be talking. But clearly, there are criminals on Twitter that people don't have a problem talking to. But if you said something in the background of something or have a certain attitude or political statement that you don't like what he does, you can villainize. Go, go. I don't know. Go. I don't want to curse because it
It's
hurts our
all good. It's all
monetization.
good. It's all
Just
good.
go. Just it's enough. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not
We'll
going to
move
listen to anything
on.
Dom has to say anymore. I already didn't pay attention to him before, but at this point, I'm like, you are irrelevant, and so is your analytics. And I am so tired of this analytics community. And again, this is not me trying to put them all together. But Jay Fresh, who I do respect, I respect his work. But like when he had that tweet about Travis Sanheim and then gets dunked on by Joel Farabee, it's like you guys are lording over people who know more than you about the sport, guaranteed.
Well, they're professionals in the sport, so
And you're like, and again, in Jay Fresh's case, he was not asking
and
for
he
a
went
fight.
back
Okay.
and clipped together all like he went back and clipped together Sandheim's best game after that and admitted like, hey, I should be watching this guy more.
Right. That's what I mean. I don't
So
want to bully Jay Fresh. He doesn't deserve that. But I'm saying like this whole like, and I am a tech guy, this whole computer nerd bullshit. Like, get it together. Be more
well, it's like
balanced
we
than
said,
that.
dude, it's like we said, the analytics are great as a retrospective tool to pair with you watching the game, not just to
Yes.
look at the spreadsheet and be like, yup, this is fucking what happening tonight on the ice, guaranteed
Right.
it. Like it's not how it works, man.
Yeah.
Anyways,
And
we'll go into the trade talk because I think that's what
yeah.
everybody's more
I
interested in.
yeah, that was it was just we wanted to talk about it because we were like laughing at it in the background. I'm like, I want to talk about this because
It's fucking funny. Yeah.
it also frustrates me. It's like it shows a lack of intelligence if you cannot go on and have conversations with people.
That
Like,
disagree with you
yes,
potentially. Yeah,
it
it is.
shows a lack of intelligence and balls
But it also just shows a lack of being like welcoming as well. Like just because somebody has a difference of
Maybe
opinion
you
in
would have
you.
changed Tony's mind.
But dude, just because it's just like any walk of life, if anybody has a difference in opinion from you, it doesn't necessarily mean I have to like not interact with that person any longer. Like that's what it basically seems like. Oh, we don't have the same
Well,
viewpoint, so I cannot interact with you. That's
you
kind of nuts.
you reserve that, and it shows that he's in a small bubble community as well. And if you guys think that, and I'll say that I've said it before on here, if people think that the NHL community is some like liberal hub, that it's just all people who are like vote the one way, you are kidding yourselves. Look at the demographics on how voting works, not just in the
Yep,
country,
yep.
but all over the world. And you think about where hockey players are primarily from, they are not from big cities, they are small town people. They are not going to think the way the media thinks. And do not create a large divide between media and hockey. It's already there. And the most respected hockey journalist, somebody like Al Morgani, who's not even my favorite opinion guy, but is in the Hockey Hall of Fame for a reason. That guy gets along with everyone.
Yeah.
That's what you should aim to be. Bill Meltzer. I have no idea where Bill votes or his personal opinions on politics or any of that stuff. I don't care. He is willing to talk to anybody. He's willing to have a hockey conversation. These are your gold standards.
Well, yeah, it just doesn't make sense. Like I said, like you're a hockey journalist. Why don't you want to talk hockey with the professional ex-player that's been in the league for years? I don't get it. In terms of like just your own platform, you making content for your life because
Yeah.
that's your job.
If journalists
It's
can
whack.
freaking interview psychopathic killers from around the world, why can't you interview or have a
Tony
conversation with Tony
D'Angelo.
D? It's just like I'm sorry. I don't.
Oh, fuck. Okay.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, you're right. I'm done. All right. Let's get on to our next topic. It's a more interesting topic anyway. Let's talk about trades. So
Yeah.
yeah, there is a trade rumor going on that I don't believe. I do believe the two sides are talking. And it was in the article itself, the rumor was quelled, but it was based, I think, primarily based off of Frank Cervalli's report from a while back, but then just kind of said that they are talking. That the Kings and the Flyers are discussing a trade. Back in the day, it was one circled around Konechny. I don't buy that for a second. Um, and you know, the other names that were dropped as being potential players of interest are Forrester, Lawton, Brink, and Farabee. And apparently, the Flyers consider Forrester completely off the table. I saw some people shocked by that. I am not shocked. I think he's completely off the table in my mind as well. Um, and yeah, I look. I do think that there is a conversations happening between the Kings and the Flyers. I don't think any of the names that were named there are most likely to be moved. The only one I think is Scott Lawton. Being realistic, I think Farabee there is a chance.
I
I
think
don't.
Fairby and Frost there's a chance.
I
Just you
think
got to be
Brink.
realistic here, and Brink too.
Yeah. I think, look, I think those names are coming up in conversations, but I'm going to point out an interview that Keith Jones just had, I believe it was on Sportsnet. Couldn't remember if it was on
Yeah, it's with
Sportsnet or
Nick
TSN.
Kyprios on the Kyprios and Bourne show.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So you heard it as well. Um, where he pretty much said that they're going into this trade deadline in this season with the exact same mentality that they had last year. And if you look at the players that they considered trading last year, they were pretty much the guys that we know, which was Nick Seeler, which they did not want to trade.
Yep.
It was Scott Lawton, which they did not want to trade. And it was Sean Walker. And he said that's the type of deal we're looking for. So if you were expecting the Flyers to be moving Bobby Brink or Frost or any of these guys in season, I think it's pretty unlikely. It's always possible depending on the return, but I think it's unlikely. And a guy like
Yeah.
Forrester, and I'm sorry, I'll open up to you in a second here, Vasili. A guy like Forrester, I think a lot of people thinking he would be traded are way oversampling what is happening this season, ignoring the sophomore slump, and also ignoring the impeccable season he had last year and why the Flyers would not want to continuously hold on to that guy. So he becomes the player they believe he can be, who is invaluable to this team, which is a two-way goal scorer with size who wins puck battles and does everything you need outside of being a playmaker. So I don't know. And then Konechny, I think, always was never going to be traded. To
Yeah,
be
I mean, Konechny wasn't going to be traded. I just want to read what Frank said, just so
sure.
the listeners are aware. So basically, Sarah Valley said, I think one team that's been more active on the trade front than we'd realized has been the LA Kings. They've popped up in a few different conversations over the past week. And then from that point, Sarah Valley also mentioned, I don't think it's dead, but I do think they talked to the Flyers about some of the forwards that they have. I'm not saying Konechny. I don't think they're trading Konechny. No, I think there's a whole group of guys that teams have been calling about. Frost Farabee, Scott Laughton, Bobby Brink. The one guy they're not willing to entertain a conversation on is Tyson Forster. So my take is they're likely have been talking. Like Frank's plugged in. He covered the Flyers for years before he went national. He has his sources. I would not be surprised if they have had talks. Does that mean anything is imminent? No. But what I will say is interesting is that the Kings have an abundance of young centers. The Flyers have an abundance of young wingers. In terms of what the teams need to swap, it makes a lot of sense. You trade wingers for centers, right? So we'll see what essentially happens. Like, I would say, don't look for the Flyers to make any big splash like type of trades like at the deadline, like Keith Jones said on the Kiprios show, right? Like they're not going to look to move guys to make rental trades. They're not in that portion of their rebuild yet, right? Like they're still looking to accrue assets to focus on the younger players.
Your
But
mic.
what I
There you go.
oh sorry, but what I will say is that in terms of like in terms of a hockey trade, I think that's possible. And what I mean by that is like there's certain young guys on the Kings that I could see the Flyers having, some interest in, like Alex Turcotte, centerman, young player, also in the same realm of a Bobby Brink, Morgan Frost, Joel Farabee. Quinton Byfield, young center, also in the same realm of those guys we talked about. Also, Alex Laferriere as well can also play the center position. So those three guys are guys I'm targeting. Like if you're the Flyers and you're trying to get Quinton Byfield on this team, then opening up and trading a Joel Farabee to me or a Morgan Frost
You'd have
becomes,
to.
yeah, that's what I mean,
To
right?
get
So
Byfield, you have no choice.
but that's what I'm trying to say. So who knows who's in the discussions? And that's kind of what I want to mention is like if it's a hockey trade where you're getting a young piece back that makes a lot of sense, maybe that's something the Flyers are exploring. But if they're talking about trading for like guys that would be rentals, I would be very, very surprised at that, right? Would you agree? Like, let's say in terms of those young guys I mentioned, that makes the most sense if you look at what Jones was saying anyway.
Yeah, look, yes, definitely. Um, my whole thing is like I don't see the Flyers making that type of trade in season. Um, I think that this is conversations for stuff that'll happen in the off season
It's totally possible.
more than a trade deadline thing. I'll say this, okay? And I was thinking about this a lot today, actually. It is getting to that point where the Flyers need to make a move and a real one. Um, Not just to remove. It's not quite here yet, but I think in the off season, it's at that point. They owe it to fans, right? People are being patient. People are buying in. They're buying into Mitchkov. It's still a job that, and a field that is entertainment based. You have to give people what they want to some degree too. And, that was kind of like Hextall when he brought in JVR, right? That was like didn't really want to do anything, but he was willing to bring in JVR, right? I'm not saying that's the type of move the Flyers should make. I actually didn't even love that move when it was made, but I do think the Flyers do need to gear up for something. I think these conversations need to happen. If Joel Farabee needs to move in that trade, fine. But it needs to be for a big return. And I can't see LA doing something like that when they're also in a playoff hunt. And they're also, like removing it's a lot easier to convert a center to a winger than it is to convert a winger to a center, right? And I don't think the Kings are going to be willing to move off of one of those assets in season. In the off season, I think they would be. So I think it's one of those things where the conversation starts now And I do think that the Flyers will look to make some kind of move in the offseason. I believe, and I think they owe it to the fans. I think a lot of people are being patient. I think people are less patient than us, and I say this for good reason. They should be. You are fans. You are not general managers, right? You are allowed to demand trades, but it has to be a good trade. And I think if it doesn't happen with the Kings, I know that Briere is talking to a lot of teams. I do think a center is probably what they're targeting, probably
Of
a young
course, yeah.
center.
Just look at what
Um,
they need, right? This a center, it's prominent. Everybody knows it. I would just say that they're going to end up making a trade for a center, whether it's, this offseason or the next, who knows? But I think it's definitely what he's trying to explore.
yeah, I think they're a good team to talk to. I don't buy that the Flyers are gonna, trade out Farabee in season or Frost in season.
I just think it depends on what the return is. And
Yeah, but I
I
agree,
wouldn't
but I don't think the other teams are gonna be willing to give up that
Well,
return in season.
that's what I was gonna say. Just like
Oh, okay, sorry.
I don't know if Byfield is on the table for them to trade for those
I don't think he's
guys,
on the table at all, but
but it depends what the package is. Like if you're, let's say, if you're the Flyers and you give both of those guys and you give a first round pick, then it becomes a lot more enticing in terms of what you might want to pay. But is that too much of an overpay? So there's a lot of things to consider.
not it might be an overpayment, but if it gets you what you really need, like if let's just say it's Farabee, Frost, and a first round pick for Byfield, which I don't know if Kings would even make that trade, but let's just say they would, right? And we give up, essentially a line of ours, right? And
And a first round pick that
right,
could be
and let's say
something.
it's our first round pick. It's not even our later one. It's like the 15 pick in the draft or something, right?
That's a big haul.
It's a good haul for a really good young player. I don't know if you're overpaying, but you're paying a lot, right, to get him. But you get your guy, right, and you're like Byfield fits right here, top line center. You know, I'm open to those type of trades. Where you are paying a lot, but it gets you exactly what you need, and you're not concerned if this guy's going to develop into a number one center, right? You're like, okay, number one center, check, right?
Yeah.
Number one winger, check,
But that's what I
right?
think the Flyers would be like jumping all over that, for example, if they did offer that and the Kings like, sure, let's do it now. Like, why
But
would you
like
wait if you're the
you
Flyers?
you brought up like Alex Turcotte, and let me look this up so I'm not wrong. Um, So I like Alex Turcotte. I would be open to trading for him. His production this year is, yeah, 10 points. Oh, I'm sorry. That is
11
not.
points in 25 games.
Why don't I see it here? Oh, I scrolled way too far. Yes, 11 points in 25 games, 3 goals, 8 assists. So he's essentially doing what Frost is doing this season. And he is how much younger than Frost? What, a year and a half?
I think Frost is
Young.
turning what, 26?
I thought he's 20. I thought he just turned 25. Maybe I'm wrong. So yeah,
Uh,
it's okay. Let's say 2 years. Okay. 2 years younger. Turcotte's 20. It turns 24 in February.
yep.
So Turcotte's like not a kid anymore, right? He's still young, but he's not a kid. And he's not really like hitting his stride. He's a fifth overall pick, but he's not like so like what like is that a Frost for Turcotte swap? You
That would be
know?
interesting. Yeah.
It would like maybe, but like again, that doesn't seem like a move that like the Kings are going to jump on unless they think that like Frost is exactly what they need. Um, I don't know. Look, I think it's possible, but I don't expect any big name prospects from the Flyers to move like Forrester. I think the Flyers are not that open to moving Bobby Brink quite yet. I think maybe in the long term they would be, but I think they still want to see what they have in him. Frost is the guy who the contract situation's weird and we don't know exactly. So that one kind of makes sense. I don't know. I see the Flyers trying to unload veterans during the season and then in the off season looking to make a trade. If they're going to move Frost, it'll be then. Um, and it'll be that case with a lot of the guys. Um, we'll see. Danny is sneaky and he does things we don't expect. But I look at it and I'm just like, The names I see in my head, I don't think Risto is they're in a rush to move him because I don't think they'll get the return for him that will make it valuable to them to move him quite yet. Um, but a guy, guys like Scott Lawton, which I don't think they want to move from either. I don't think they're going to be rushing to move really anybody this season.
Yeah, we'll have to
Um,
see what happens right at the trade deadline where they are. I think if there's a chance to move and sell guys and get a couple picks, like they'll do that. That's kind of what Jones was saying.
right.
So we'll
But
see,
like
right?
who? That's my problem. Like I look at the Flyers roster.
Well, they'll probably trade Johnson, maybe. If they can, they
That has
can.
I I feel
He's
like
not
that
gonna get
falls
much.
right, but I also feel like that falls on Johnson. I feel like
Yeah.
because the return is not that much, and they're gonna be like, okay,
Well,
well,
I mean, you said you don't see them trading Lawton or Risto. I mean, I feel different. I think if they're at the trade deadline and the team's not looking like they're gonna be in playoff contention, why wouldn't you try to trade them at this
because I
point?
look at this defense without Ristolainen and it worries me.
But it doesn't matter about the defense now. It matters, at least to the
Uh,
GM, it's about the next 3, 4
well,
years, right?
even next year. See, I think the Flyers can be a playoff team next year,
They can be for sure, but
like a
I
real
just
one,
no, I definitely
not a
see
bubble.
it. I definitely see it. I just think there's certain guys you have to look at and be like, hey, like eventually you're picking so many prospects, you have to filter guys in. Like in 2, 3 years, is there going to be room for a Scott Lawton after you've made all these draft picks? Like somebody has to graduate, right?
Scott Lund's the only guy that I look at the Flyers lineup and I go, "There's your guy
Him,
to trade."
I could see Hathaway move if
The
they extended him, but I could see him move to a playoff team if they're, there's the returns there and depending on what you
but
get.
what is a return for Hathaway that
Like if you get a second or third round pick for Hathaway, how are you going to say no to that?
third round pick? I'd easily say no. Second round pick, I'd
I would
be
take it.
tempted. Um,
Got to
the
think
whole
about fourth
thing,
line player and relative value,
the
right?
whole thing with Lawton is that man, they love him with their like culture.
Oh, of course, yeah,
It would
that's a
have to
factor.
be an overpayment, and if that overpay, like again, I would trade Scott Lawton.
If you're getting a first rounder for him, like was rumored, I just can't believe they haven't traded him yet, in my opinion. Like I love the guy, but if you're getting first round picks back,
Well, I
I
think
don't
it's
know.
because I think Bill Meltzer's take on it is probably accurate that it was a conditional first, that it was
Yeah,
they
I
were
think
getting offered a second.
if it's a bona fide first, like you got to take it, right?
Yeah, and I think there are teams out there that are willing to pay a lot for Scott Lawton, ones that have culture issues, that haven't been able to get over the hump, that think that what Lawton does for the Flyers can do for them. Because it's his value is much higher off the ice than it is on the ice at this point to the Flyers. And that's where I'm like, all right, well, I'm ready to move off of him, but I don't know if the Flyers are like as a culture, as a team.
Yeah, we'll see.
Um,
I think the thing with Lawton is that if you look at what they've done and what they've built up with the culture, I think they're eventually going to get to a point where it's like, hey, we've already built this foundation. Okay, we can implement a young guy into this role that we drafted. We don't necessarily need you here for this anymore.
yeah,
That's
I
the point they want to get to. Will they be there as early as this trade deadline? Who's to say? But I'm just saying from a
I would
situation
trade
if
Delorier.
well, yeah, I think anybody would do that, but oh man.
I would trade Delorier. I would trade. I think Eric Johnson's going to be like that whole thing where they ask him,
I
they
could
go,
see
"Do you want to
Zamula.
move?"
I could see Zamula get moved potentially.
Yeah, yeah. I see. I actually would trade Zamula over Risto. Risto's contract really doesn't bother me.
I like Risto. I just think that you're going to get the Leafs or some sort of team is going to overpay for that toughness, and it's going to be
Overpayment,
worth it.
yes. Look, if you're gonna overpay, there's a lot of guys I'd be
Well,
willing to trade if you're overpaying for them.
I'm just thinking about the trade deadline and what it comes down to. Like every year, it's an arms race, right? So you see a certain team that you're going up against, and depending on where the Flyers are, you know, it might make sense to say, hey, let's see what team wants to bid for this guy and what they'll bid for him. And
Yeah.
if it matches what you think the value is and exceeds that, then it
What
just you're
what's
doing
I'm sorry
your
to cut you off, but what's your overpayment for Risto?
first round pick and a second round pick. I'm taking it.
Okay. Yeah, I would do that.
Even first round pick, I'm probably
No
taking it.
money retained.
Yeah, no money. But even first round pick, I'm probably taking it no money retained, just in the sense that like you recouped your asset and what you gave up to get him. And now you have 4 first round picks potentially in this upcoming draft. If you get it for this draft,
Yeah, yeah.
you can move up and maybe get a first overall pick potentially with that those types of assets. Like you got to look at it from like a long-term
Yeah,
strategical
no,
plan, right?
but that's the thing. It's like again, if you're willing to pay that type of cost for Risto, it's a very different conversation.
Do you think he would get a first rounder? Like, do you not think that people would pay for
I
him for
think
that?
he's worth I think he's worth a first round pick, yes.
I think teams will pay that up for him, in my
I think he
opinion.
is. I think if you look at what Risto brings, the fact that he is pretty good.
If Dennis Savard can go for a first round pick from Columbus, why can't
Right.
Risto go for a first round pick? Like
Dennis
I
Dennis Savard was a expiring contract. I think is the only
That's
difference.
true, yeah. But I just think with Ristolainen where the cap's going, like I think they'll be able to move him if they want to.
I think they could move. I think he'll be easier to move even next year over this year.
Well, yeah, the less
Um,
term on the deal,
right.
right?
So all this stuff kind of weighs in. Now Zamula, on the other hand, he is an interesting player, which I actually didn't really consider until you just said it. And I'm like, yeah, that might be the one. Because you look at Andre.
There's a log jam.
Zamula is replaceable, even though you like him as an org. You think there's maybe more there. Right, there's a log jam. He doesn't necessarily like excel at anything in the game, but I also think about like what's the return? Is the return for Z a third round pick? How tempting is that? I don't know. Like when we have so many picks, I like don't know how tempting it is to move off of guys when we're also fighting for a wild card spot.
It's
And
it's more tempting to me depending on what their plans are this offseason. If the plan
right,
is to go to make a big
true.
splash for players,
Then
the more
clear cap
assets
space.
you have, the better because you can empower those assets to make your trades and your clearing space. So
Yeah.
it just depends on what the strategy is for this upcoming offseason. If they're continuing to go and they don't really want to make big moves, maybe until the next season after, then maybe it makes sense to hold on to guys. We'll
Yeah.
see.
I don't know. I guess in my head, I always saw this upcoming off season. We talked about this endlessly. You and I were on the same page with this. It's like this off season seems to be more of that time than in the season,
Yeah.
um, to me. But I do think it's getting to that time where the Flyers need to do something.
I think this offseason for sure they're going to make a big trade.
Yeah.
What it ends up being for and who, we're going to have to see, right?
No,
But
no idea. It'd be funny if it's just fucking Fedotov gets moved.
yeah, I mean
You know?
he could get traded too. It's all possible.
Yeah, I mean it's all possible. I agree. I just think unlikely. I really think they're going to be I think it's going to be much more uneventful this trade deadline than it
I
was
think it
last
just
year
all
for the
to bet. It
Flyers.
just all depends on where they're at. Like if they're in a playoff spot firmly, I don't expect much moves. If they're out of the playoffs by like 5 to 7 points, they're going to sell somebody off. It's just the nature of how this league
I
works.
Yeah, no, I agree, but I don't really know who. Like Eric Johnson's going to retire at the end of this year. It's going to be his call.
Somebody you wouldn't expect, Yariv. Probably.
Maybe, you know. I'd actually be open to moving Bobby Brink, but again, it just depends on like the return. And our guy's gonna be wanting to trade a young guy for a young guy. Like I don't know how much better that really makes you for a playoff run. Typically for a playoff run, you're looking for guys like Garnet Hathaway, Scott Lawton, Rasmus
Those are
Ristolainen.
the guys I'm thinking personally.
Yeah.
Those three guys.
But after they extended Hathaway, I don't know how interested they really are to move him.
Yeah,
And
that's
the
true.
impact that Scott Lawton is on the locker room. I don't know how, because they're so focused on culture. Risto is the guy I'm like, yeah, it makes sense, but then I look at the way he's been playing and, I'd rather trade Sealer than Rasmus Ristolainen.
Yeah, I would probably rather trade him too, but we'll see what happens.
Like to me, I think Risto's a better player than Sealer. I think he's more
I
effective.
He is better than Sealer, right? Like he's played in top pair roles before. He's had a lot more experience playing against, top
He's
line players.
right-handed. He's
Yeah.
big. He's very big. And our D is not big. They're small.
There's definitely a need for him, but I just think if there's a first round pick on the table, they're going to move him with that contract. It just makes
If
so
if
much
it's
sense.
if it's the package that you talked about, yeah. First
Even
and a
if,
second.
yeah, of course, that's a no-brainer, but even at first, I think I would probably move him. It's just
Okay,
like
a first, and it would have to be money going the other way. So it'd have to be like another defenseman coming back the other way.
potentially, yeah.
I don't know. I'm very skeptical about this trade deadline. I'm not skeptical about the off season, and I am not. And I actually think it's like shit or get off the pot time. This off season for the Flyers to be like, all right, we got the Mitchkov burst. He's here. Check, you know, but like let we got to do something. We can't just sit in this position where we're like slowly improving and just drafting guys. We're gonna have a slew of very young guys coming up anyway. Like Tuamala and guys like that's where like I look at Brink and I'm like, Tuamala is gonna make it. His jump eventually. It's like Luchenko's coming next year. You're gonna have to make some room. I just don't know if that type of trade is what happens during the season. And I think this is the time to move Scott Lawton, but or next year, but I don't know if they want
I
to.
just think you're going to miss the boat on potential assets, and then he's going to be worth
I
not a
think that
lot.
I think they might be okay with that.
It's definitely possible. I'm just
You know what
saying,
I
like,
mean?
if you're from a roster building perspective, like if you're getting offered maybe a first round pick for a fourth liner, like I can't advocate that that's a smart move to deny. Like, sorry, that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I mean value wise, I just look at their behind the scenes look at what like
Yeah.
we saw that the way that the team responded to Lawton scoring 4 goals.
Oh, of
You know
course.
what
I
I'm
just mean
saying?
like at a certain point, like when's your culture built up to a point where it's just like, hey, like we got to do what's best for actually building the team versus the strategy of culture,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Um, I don't know if should we do a prospect update today?
I don't think
I
there's
feel like
too much to
I don't think
update.
anything really changed. So let's save that one. I do want to bring up this last point here, which wasn't on the topic list I sent you, but I realized it while we were recording. So
Sure.
the Phantoms did officially sign Jacob Gauthier.
Yeah, I
Um,
saw that.
yeah, so and for a really good reason. If you've been following the Phantoms at all this year, you would see his name pop up quite a bit on the
He's
scoring
having a
sheet.
great season,
Yeah,
man.
11 goals, 17 points in 25 games. He's been one of the best players on the Phantoms, especially here in the second half of their beginning of the season. He is really transformed into another player, and it's a guy who came out of nowhere, and is a nice success story for him. And I don't know, maybe a guy will even get a call up. I don't think he's that old. I think he's 25, 23.
He's even
He's
younger, yeah,
23 years
23.
old, right-handed center, 6'3". Um,
There could be some upside for
yeah,
sure.
it's a guy I'm going to keep an eye on. You know, he might be that guy who earns a call up just because he's playing so well with the Phantoms, and maybe they don't see anything too high out of his future. Maybe they see him as a fourth line player in the NHL, but a valuable fourth line center with size who can pot in some goals every now and then is a tougher guy. Um, I guess this one's a credit to Lappy because he really believed in this guy, and he's been playing him heavily for the past 2 seasons, and it seems to be paying off. So, just wanted to point that out because I think it's pretty cool, and we'll see how he transforms and see if he can build on that. There's a lot of guys, and also shout out to Zayd Wisdom, who, by the way, has been putting up points all of a sudden. Um, not a ton of points. But I will say he's now got 6 points on the year in 12 games. And he started off with like 0 points in the first like 12 games or so. So maybe a revitalization there for Zayd Wisdom,
Yeah, we'll see.
which is really cool.
Something to keep an eye on. I think for Goche it's going to be interesting because I just think in terms of center depth they're so they're just lacking centers, and Elliot Denoyer hasn't really lived up to expectations in the last 2 seasons. So this
Yeah.
might kind of be a replacement in a sense of him, but we'll see.
Yeah. And Denoyer has not done too much. I think he did have a couple goals finally. Yeah, he's got 5 points in 22 games. So now Zayd Wisdom is out producing him, which is kind of funny to think about.
Yeah, also not
Um,
great for Denoyer, I don't think.
yeah. Yeah, maybe that trade that maybe some moves at the trade deadline might be AHL guys too,
I could see it
like
for
a guy
sure.
like Denoyer who maybe needs we saw Ronnie Attard get moved.
Change of
He's
scenery type
older,
thing.
but
Yeah.
we'll see. All right, let's cut it at that because we were going longer than I think either one of us anticipated, and I think we're probably good at this
It's all
point.
good. Yeah, good episode, man.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for listening. You want to leave our audience with anything?
No, just as we go like kind of into next year, I just want to try to get more articles up on the Flyers Nitty Gritty site. So keep an eye out. I'm gonna try writing a bit more than I have been. So
Yeah, so true. Um, all right. Just want to remind everybody, please like and subscribe. Hit the notification bell for notifications. For the audio versions, go to Spotify and iTunes and give us a follow and a rating there again. These are the best way to support our podcast. If you have made it this far and you are not subscribed, please, 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 please do those things, or at the very least, just subscribe on YouTube. That means a lot to us. And also, a shout out to our sponsors, Jim Steaks at 4th and South. Make sure to go get yourself a cheesesteak. They have one of the best, if not the best, cheesesteak in Philadelphia. Public Summit Adjusters, 215-752-0560. Go to them for all of your insurance facilitation needs. They will help you with your insurance company and your insurance claims. Again, Public Summit Adjusters, 215-752-0560. And also shout out once again to Sports Spider. Go to them for all of your aggregation needs of not just hockey content, not just Flyers content, but also all sports. They have everything available there: podcasts, videos, links to articles, and they, link directly out to the content creators. So they're pretty cool. Make sure to check out sportspider.com. The link is in the description. All right, we love you guys. Thank you for listening, and we hope you made it all the way to the end here. Yeah, we're gonna keep on going. Thank you again. We love you. And remember, always stay